a student who's probably become familiar to you by this point, Cody Onmeese, has been very active in our Christian ministries on campus. He is a member of UF's wrestling team. I think prayer and wrestling are a good way to get through life. He's a senior majoring in marketing, and he'll be one of those graduates we will see next weekend. So Cody will offer our blessing, and then following Cody, I will invite our very fine professor from the College of Business, Scott Grant, to come to the lectern and introduce our special guest speaker this morning. So Cody, would you join me?
Morning, everyone. Thanks for being here today. Super excited to be sharing with you this morning. When I first arrived at the University of Findlay, I was on a different mission as a wrestling recruit. My goals coming in weren't to impact others or serve in any capacity, really other than within my team. I was too focused on my own pursuit of becoming an All-American and hopefully a national champion, and planned to leave my legacy at the University of Findlay in that way. But halfway through my freshman year, that changed for me. I had been having pain in my lower back, so I went to an orthopedic specialist who revealed to me a full fracture in my L5 vertebrae, with that same vertebrae slipping forward. As you can imagine, this crushed me as it ended my competitive wrestling career prematurely. While the only thing I could focus on at the time was my heartbreaking loss in something that I loved to do, I was reminded by my mentors that wrestling was not what defined me, but it was my faith in the Lord that did. After prayer and reflection through the rest of my freshman year, I began to see doors open for me through servant leadership. I was able to remain active on the wrestling team by helping the guys with workouts, taking red shirts to tournaments to coach them, and being involved in any other ways that I could. I also began a friendship with Pastor Matt Ginter, our director of Christian ministries, and I served within the campus ministries here for 3 years. I led a weekly Bible study at my house for 3 straight years. I served as the president of Fellowship of Christian Athletes, and I also served as a public relations officer for Revive, our student-led on-campus weekly worship service. Other opportunities continued to surface for me in servant leadership, whether it was through my church at Gateway, to help family or friends in need, or even to give an invocation at many different events hosted by President Fell and the university. In hindsight, of course, my injury was still devastating, but it's a perfect example of the fulfillment of Romans 8:28, that all things work together for good to those that love God. My focus changed from myself to others, and it helped me understand a greater purpose, fulfilling a call in my life from the Lord. Serving someone or something beyond myself gives me a sense of happiness, not happiness in my pride for myself, but joy and excitement of seeing the lives of others change for the better. Selflessly and humbly serving others demonstrates a great picture of leadership by setting an example for others to follow and spreading love and joy to those who you serve. So with that being said, I cannot thank the University of Findlay enough for the opportunities that were presented to me during my time as a student here, and would cherish them going forward in my pursuit of a meaningful life and a productive career. Thank you. And now I'd just like to take a few seconds to bless the food. So if you'll pray with me. Heavenly Father, we're so grateful to gather here this morning in your name, Lord. Just thank you for this opportunity, Father, and thank you for everybody who came out today so safely, Father. We just pray that you'll be with us during our time and be with our speakers this morning. Just bless their word, Father. And I pray that you'll bless this food to our bodies as well. Just give it nutrients and let us be energized for our day and go on and serve you. We love you. We thank you. It's in Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Good morning. Thank you all for coming. My name is Dr. Scott Grant. I currently am an assistant professor in the College of Business. And before I read the introduction for Dan, I want to take a few seconds and thank a few people. To give this event and Dan a little bit of context, 2 years ago I had a group of students come to me and they had found this servant leadership conference at Kent State Tuscaroras put on by Provia. And they were like, Dr. Grant, can we go? And I was like, yeah, sure, it's fine, but we're going to have to leave pretty early. So we piled in a van at 4 a.m. We drove across the state, and we attended the conference. And there were 3 main speakers at the event. One was John Gordon, who you guys probably all have heard of. He's written numerous books. One was Roy Hall, who previously had played for the Buckeyes and has a foundation in Columbus. And the other was Dan Owolabi, who was a pastor at the time. And when we finished the event, we got back in the van. I asked the students, I was like, so what'd you think? What was impactful? And they said, honestly, like, Dan Owolabi was amazing. And I was like, I agree. They're like, Dr. Grant, we got to figure out how to bring him to campus. And for the last 2 years, we've been trying to find the best time to do that. And we're super thankful that he's here this morning to share with you. And at 10, he's going to provide a servant leadership workshop for about 100 students. It's going to be incredible. But that would not have been possible without Dr. Latta, Dr. Osborne in the College of Business, and Dr. McIntosh in the College of Education. So thank you so much for doing this and supporting it. Now, Dan Owolabi has always believed that the greatest leaders are servants first. That's why he has made it his mission to help others achieve exceptional results by leading from a mindset of serving. For nearly a decade, he served as a high school teacher and pastor in Northeast Ohio. The work, while demanding, was incredibly rewarding. So in 2017, Dan decided to take his passion for developing leaders to a wider audience. Now, Dan continues using his expertise to inspire fellow leaders on a global scale, as well as within his own community. In 2018, he also accepted the executive director position at Branches Worldwide, an innovative nonprofit aiming to impact 30 leaders in 30 countries for 30 years. And while he has helped thousands of business executives, educators, athletes, and young adults to lead more effectively, he is the first to recognize that his own most important leadership responsibility remains to his wife, Erica, and their 2 daughters. Dan holds an undergraduate degree from Malone University and a graduate degree from Ashland University, which we won't hold against you, right? But if you could please join me in welcoming Dan to the stage.
Good morning, everyone. It's good to see you. Now, I'll tell you what, I just want to get started with something that I know oftentimes people think. Now, I speak to businesses, and I'll speak to organizations and to campuses, and always, whenever I go somewhere, there's one question on everyone's mind that I just got to get out of the way right away. And it's this: how the heck do you say this guy's last name? So I want to tell you just a quick story to kind of get you on the same page so that you know how to say it. So if there's ever an opportunity to butcher it, you don't. You say it the right way. It's this. So you have to imagine yourself in a hotel. And you're on the 3rd floor, and you realize that you want to get some ice. And so you say, okay, where's the ice? And the ice is on the 2nd floor. So you get in the elevator, and you press a button. But you press the wrong button, and you don't know it. And so the elevator is going down, and then suddenly the doors open. And you walk out, and you look around, you're like, oh, Owolabi. That's how you say my last name. I'm Dan Owolabi, and it is good to be here. Now, I'm looking around, and I saw you getting some food and getting some coffee, and something struck me. This is a breakfast for leaders. But I'm looking around, and there's all kinds of different leaders here in the room. I mean, there's leaders from different generations, leaders from different industries, leaders of different genders, different races. There's all kinds of diversity in this room. But I'm looking around, and I'm realizing that we are all leaders, though. And we all have one thing in common in particular. And today I want to talk about that specific thing. And I want to do it by starting off with just a quick exercise with everybody. I want to do a collective confession. All of us together. Now, what I want to do is I want to put some words on the screen, and I want all of us together, no sitting back and just watching. Everyone's got to participate, so if you see your neighbor not participating, give him a quick elbow. Everyone's in on this. And I want you to repeat after me, and we will get on the same page. All right? Here we go. I may be in charge, but I don't always know what to do. I may be in charge, but I don't have all the answers. I'm never the smartest person in the room. I'm just the leader. Isn't that the truth? As leaders, isn't that our dirty secret? When we're in a meeting and big decisions need to be made and the conversation is over, people turn and they look at us and they say, well, what do we do? And you as the leader are supposed to pull out some sort of magic solution and let everybody know what to do. But in reality, you don't have all the answers all the time. And sometimes you're just guessing. You see, I lead an international nonprofit, and I speak to leaders all the time. And one thing I recognize from this confession and from leaders that I meet with all over the world and all over Ohio is this. Leaders constantly feel a gap. Doing this confession, you felt it too. That's what I want to talk about today, that gap. You see, it's a gap that every leader has felt. Every president has felt it. Every professor has felt it. Every champion has felt it. Every winner has felt it. Every athlete has felt it. Every CEO has felt it. Every leader has felt it. It's the feeling of a gap between who you actually are and who people think you are. That gap between who you are and who people think you are, as a leader, that gap can be excruciating. That gap oftentimes represents the most difficult seasons of your leadership. I want to talk about that gap today. And I want to help you close that gap and become a more authentic servant leader. It starts by just telling you a quick story. I remember the first time I really felt that gap in a real way. It was when I was in high school. And I grew up in a small town. How many of you guys grew up in a small town? Anybody here grew up? Okay, so you know where I'm going with this. I grew up in a small town. And it was a small high school. And I remember doing everything I could to blend in. And when you're 6'4" and black, you can't blend in. But I remember trying my hardest to be just like everybody else. And it wasn't happening. And mostly, it wasn't because of my height, but mostly it was because of my family. It was where I grew up. Always got in the way of just being normal. See, here's my family. This is it's me and my sister, my brother, and my mom and my dad. It's my family. Now, we were the only black family in the whole town, small town, only black family. But on the other side of it, this is something you can't see from this picture. My first language wasn't English. My first language was sign language. What you can't tell from this picture is both my mom and dad are deaf. They can't hear. I remember that being the defining characteristic in our town. And I hated it. I mean, now I realize such a rich history. My mom and dad, both Nigerian immigrants, both deaf, both had real challenges. And now that I look back, such a rich heritage. But at the time, man, it was just weird. Like, I did not want to be defined by my mom and dad. But you couldn't get away from it. I mean, people would come up to me. I was 10. And people would come up to me. Adults would come up to me and say things like, how do your mom and dad get a job? Or, how do they drive? I remember after a while just getting pretty sassy. I mean, people would come up to me and say, hey, how did you learn to talk? I'll say, I don't know, how'd you learn to talk? Or, you know, they'd come at me and they say things like, wow, like, why aren't you deaf? I don't know, why aren't you deaf? Like, and the answer is I don't really know. But on the other side of it, there's also moments that we were in the supermarket and my mom and dad would be talking and I'd be talking with them. We'd be talking like, hey, should we get peas or should we get carrots? And I'm signing to them And people would literally stop the cart in the middle of the aisle and turn and look and be like, holy cow. I remember not wanting anything to do with it. And so, unfortunately, I tried my hardest, my freshman year, my sophomore year, my junior year, to distance myself. And if we're talking about creating a gap between who you are and who people think you are, I was trying to create that gap as much as I could. I wanted it to be a big gap because I didn't want people to ever look at me and say, oh, there goes the kid with two deaf parents. I wanted them to say anything else. I remember I got my first real opportunity to make that gap big and just be normal when I got my first car. I'll tell you about it. I remember asking my mom and dad over and over again, can I get a car? Can I get a car? Can I get a car? Because I was 16, 17, and all my friends had gotten a car, and they all had their licenses, and I had my license, but I didn't have a car yet. And so I went to my mom and dad, and I said, hey, can I get a car? And my mom and dad, they were Nigerian immigrants, so they were old school. They had worked for everything they ever got, and they were not going to deprive me of the joy of working hard for my own car. So I knew I wasn't going to get one. But I thought there might be a way. So one day, I remember after basketball practice, I played basketball. One day after basketball practice, I went into the locker room, and the coach came up beside me, put his hand on my shoulder. He said, Dan, I want you to come to my office. So I walked in. I remember it was Dwayne Miller. He had an old tweed jacket on. I walked into his office, and he sat down. He's about 75 years old. Puts his hand on my shoulder, and he says, Dan, my wife and I, we talked. We want to give you a car. I couldn't believe it. I was 17 years old. They wanted to give me a free car. I mean, I was just ecstatic. I was so excited. I remember running and telling everybody. And that was the moment that I felt different in a good way. I felt special in a good way. So much so, though, it wasn't just because of the car. It was also because there was another guy about 90 miles away named LeBron James who grew up about the same time that I did. He was also tall. He was also black. He also played basketball, and he also got a free car that year. And I thought to myself, man, our destinies, they are intertwined. I mean, how many guys get free cars? I mean, his was a 2000 Hummer. And mine was an 1989 Ford Probe, but hey, but that Probe meant as much to me as that Hummer probably meant to LeBron. Because it made me something that I hadn't been before. I could be normal. I could drive just like everybody else. And I did. And that's how I got my first car. Let me tell you how I lost my first car. I got into the habit about 3 weeks into driving the car to school where I would time myself. I remember waking up in the morning and thinking, I wonder how long it takes to get from my bed to get my butt in my homeroom seat. And after a couple weeks of trying, I realized it took 14 and a half minutes. I mean, I would wake up and I would get my clothes on, I'd take a shower, I'd get my breakfast, I'd get my bag, I'd get my car, I'm driving, I'm going, I'm moving. And I remember just bam, 14 and a half minutes every time. And then I realized I could shave a little bit of time off if I just run through a stop sign. There was this flat plain close to my house, and you could see in both directions for the most part, but there was a small hill where if you were driving, you had to look to see if any cars were coming, and you could see a car coming way before the stop sign, but if you looked and you saw a car wasn't coming, you probably could get through the intersection without an issue because no cars are coming. And so I thought to myself, man, if I can get through this intersection, I can shave off 2 minutes of my time. That's 2 minutes of sleep. And when you're in high school, 2 minutes of sleep is everything. And so I worked to shave that time off, and it worked. And so I was getting to school in 12 and a half minutes now. And it worked great until one morning when I woke up late. I remember waking up, looking at the clock, thinking, oh my gosh, I'm late. And so I got up as fast as I could. I didn't even shower. I got my food, got my bag, got in the car. I was driving, I'm driving, and I'm thinking, okay, here comes the intersection. It's coming, and I'm looking, and I'm thinking, I can get through this. I got to get through this. I don't have my foot on the gas. I have it off a little bit, but I'm driving as fast as I can, and I'm pushing, and I'm pushing. And I'm thinking, okay, no car's coming, no car's coming, no car's coming. I'm looking, nothing, good, go. And I'm flying through the intersection. And I'm not in the intersection 1 second when I see it. On my left side, it was a big yellow school bus. School bus hit me right here on my left side. My car lifted up off the ground, did a 180 in the air. I could hear the glass shattering. I could hear the metal crunching. And when my car landed, I could feel blood going down my face. And I looked up and I saw a bus full of little kids crying. That's when I knew I'd screwed up. You see, one of the worst moments from there was going to talk to the coach who gave me the free car. Knocking on his door, sitting down on his couch, looking him and his wife in the eye and saying, everybody's fine. Nobody got hurt except for me. But that car that you gave me a couple weeks ago, I totaled it. Thanks for investing in me. Or going to my mom and dad, who didn't want me to have the car in the first place, and saying, I'm sorry, I screwed up. Those were tough moments. But I wanted to create distance between who I was and who people thought I was. And the worst moment was when I was at the local Dairyette. And I was walking, getting some ice cream just a couple weeks after. And I turned the corner and I heard two women talking. And they said, hey, did you hear about that guy who hit a school bus full of kids? Yeah, I heard about that guy. Isn't that the kid with two deaf parents? And I realized you can't maintain that gap. I tried to create a gap between who I was and who people thought I was, but in reality, I just couldn't maintain it. And I was just that kid again. You see, the truth is, it can be exhausting to try to maintain that gap. And some of you in here, you know exactly what it feels like. Some of you in here have that gap. For some of you, you have health issues, and you don't want anybody to know. Not your coworkers, not your extended family, not your employers. And you do everything you can to create distance between who you are and what you experience and what people think of you. And it's exhausting. For some of you, you have serious financial issues with your business or your personal life. And that distance between what you're experiencing and what people see is critical. People can't know that you can't make payroll. They can't know. For some of you in here, you're expected to perform. And deep down inside, you don't know if you can pull it off. But you're spending a lot of energy and a lot of time creating that distance so people think you can. But you're just not sure. There's some of you in here who are having marital issues. And in your industry, people can't know that you don't have it all together. See, sometimes we create gaps. We do everything we can to put distance between who we are and who people think we are. or who we are and what people see. Some of us, though, we're not trying to create gaps. Those gaps have been created for us. For some of us, we walk into a room and people think we're better than we are. They put that gap on us. They think that, well, I mean, of course, you're the owner of the company, and you've got the answers. Or you're the CEO. Or you just got the promotion. You're the VP. Of course you know how to do. And you don't. And you wish you could tell them, hey, I'm just like you. I'm figuring it out as I go. But in reality, people want that gap sometimes. If you've ever felt that, if you're feeling that right now, I'm glad you're here. Because I want to help you close that gap and become a more authentic servant leader. Now, in order to do it, in order to become a more authentic leader, here's what you got to know. You got to know this. You have to know the difference between these two words. Authenticity, let's go the right way. Insecurity and authenticity. Now, I remember after I felt that gap in a real way, I remember never wanting to feel that way ever again. And so I remember thinking to myself, okay, what can I do to create a more authentic persona, or at least become a more authentic leader? And I spent years trying to figure it out. Eventually, it led me to get a graduate degree, and I studied the greatest leaders in American history. People who were presidents and pastors and CEOs and activists and scientists and professors and people who really poured their time into leadership and people who went through the ups and the downs. And here's what I learned. It was surprising. I learned that even the best leaders in the world have struggled with that gap. One leader in particular who I admire a lot was Abraham Lincoln. Abraham Lincoln went through a lot. And I spent a lot of time, years, studying Abraham Lincoln, and he gave a quote that I thought was tremendous. You see, Abraham Lincoln was a person who did everything he could to be authentic, but during the Civil War, oftentimes people wanted that gap. And so he said, in one of his diaries, he said, I did everything I could. And there are moments when I was driven to my knees because I realized my wisdom and who I was as a person wasn't good enough for the moment. There were things that he needed to do that he didn't know how to do. There's problems he needed to solve that he just didn't have the answers to. And he felt that gap. Every leader deals with it. And how you manage that gap, I believe, is the biggest difference between good leaders and great leaders. Great leaders manage it well. And it starts by understanding the difference between insecurity and authenticity. I want to show you something. See, insecurity comes in certain moments. It surprises all of us, but it only comes in particular moments. You see, for all of us, we've been talking about this, all of us have a gap between who we are and who people think we are. And in this gap is where you and I start to feel some very uncomfortable feelings. See, in this gap is where fear grows. Anxiety grows. You see, in this gap, if the gap is big, and some of us have bigger gaps than other people, if this gap is big, the bigger the gap, the more fear and anxiety you feel. And in this gap is where insecurity lives. Insecurity is a powerful driver of behavior. Because we're insecure, we buy the wrong thing. We make the wrong decision. We hire the wrong people. Insecurity grows as this gap grows between who you are and who people think you are. And oftentimes, the more insecure you are, the more you try to grow this gap because you don't want people to know what you're really going through. But authenticity is different. Authenticity closes the gap. If you're an authentic leader, you're someone who operates with a smaller gap than other people. There's not much distance between who you actually are and who people think you are. And when there's a smaller gap, you deal with less fear, less anxiety, less insecurity, because you ain't got nothing to hide. You've got nothing to lose. You've got nothing to prove. You just are who you are, who you are. That's when you're an authentic leader. Authenticity is a big deal today, especially if you're leading millennials. Authenticity in the next 10 years could be the hallmark of you as a leader if you're leading anybody under the age of 35. You see, because for the next generation of workers, the next generation of leaders, they want people who are authentic first. They would rather follow a leader who is always real than a leader who is always right. For some of us in here, being right is way more important than being real. If that's you, I hate to tell you this, you're going to struggle. Authenticity is the name of the game. Closing that gap. It's not just me saying it, though. There's a professor named Bill George. He wrote the book on authenticity. He's a Harvard professor, and he said a lot of great things about authenticity. He's really started the movement, but here's something that he said that I want to read this to you. It's so important. I want to read it to you straight from his book, Truenorth. This is what he said. And if you haven't read it, you should pick it up. He says this. He says, authentic leaders are true to themselves and to what they believe in. They engender trust and develop genuine connections with others. Because people trust them, authentic leaders are able to motivate people to achieve high levels of performance. Rather than letting their expectations of others guide them, they are their own persons, and they go their own way. As servant leaders, they're more concerned about serving people than they are about their own success or recognition. That's what an authentic leader is. Someone who is real rather than always trying to be right. You've got nothing to hide, you've got nothing to prove, you've got nothing to lose. I want to show you how to become an authentic leader. But here's the thing. You can't give someone 4 easy steps to be an authentic leader, right? That's pretty inauthentic. There's no cookie-cutter way to do it. But there are questions that you can ask that get at your own story to help you understand what your authentic leadership mark is. And that's what I want to help you with today. I want to give you 4 critical questions to ask yourself in moments of deep insecurity and deep anxiety. Every leader has felt it. I felt it. Where there's a big gap between who you are and who people think you are, and you've got to close that gap. 4 questions to ask so you can walk into every room and be your authentic self and lead with confidence and courage. So, here are the 4 questions. I'll give it to you one by one. The first one is, what's my crucible? What's my craft? Who's in my care and what's my cause? Those are the 4 questions you ask yourself. I want to explain them to you quickly. The first one is, what's my crucible? Now, a crucible, for those of you who don't know and just get on the same page, a crucible is a difficult season that you go through in life. One that if someone paid you, you would not go back again. But you're thankful for it. It's changed the way you look at things. It's changed the way you feel about things. It's shaped your character. If you can point to a crucible in your life and say, yep, that's when I started to become me, you got to go back there. You got to understand it. Because it's the power to help you become an authentic leader. My mom had a significant crucible in her life. I remember asking her the question, so tell me a little bit about how you got to the United States, because she's a Nigerian deaf immigrant. That's really hard to do, especially as a woman in the 1970s. It's difficult. And so she told me her story, and she mentioned her crucible. She was born deaf in Nigeria in the 1950s. And her mom and her dad, neither of them learned sign language. They didn't care enough about her situation to care. She's one of 7 brothers and sisters. She was the 8th. And so they didn't care a ton about connecting with her or learning. They had a lot to work on. And so nobody learned sign language growing up for her. And then she got to high school. And her teachers didn't care as much as they should have. And so she failed her freshman year and had to take it again. She failed her sophomore year, had to take it again. She failed her junior year, and she had to take it again. And then finally, the administrators came up to her, the principal came up to her, and handed her a certificate at the end of her junior year and said, hey, look, we realize this has been a struggle for you. Hey, just take this certificate. We'll just say you graduated, and you don't have to finish this last year. And they sent her on her way. Her mom thought that she probably wouldn't get married. Her dad thought that she probably wouldn't get a job. One day, somebody out of the blue, as a member of her youth group, came up to her and said, hey, you're smarter than you think you are. You're better than you think you are. That person spent a lot of time with her and really helped her understand that she had more potential than she realized. And so my mom said, you know what? I can do this. I can figure life out. She heard about a scholarship that was being offered to the United States for people who were handicapped. It was offered by the Nigerian government, people who were handicapped, and they could go from Nigeria over to the United States and get a college education. And so she said, I'm going to try. So she marched herself down to the government office, and she sat down in the room, and you can imagine what it looked like. I mean, this is in Nigeria, 1960s-ish. This is Nigeria. And so it's a hot, dusty room. It's full. The fan is going. It's rickety. And she's sitting there. And she goes up to the counter and she takes a number. And then she waits and waits. And then when her number's called and she sees it, she walks up and she puts her number down and she says, and she could talk a little bit, she said, I'd like to apply for the scholarship. The guy looks up from the table. He's writing. He looks up and he says, okay, very good. So tell me your name. Then she looks at him and she says, I can't hear. And then she says this. She looked at him and she could see in his eyes the disappointment. And he said, oh, okay. Because it's much harder to help someone who's in a wheelchair than it is to help someone who's deaf. Much harder to help someone who's deaf than to help someone who's in a wheelchair or someone who has a physical handicap. And so she went and sat down, and then she waited. And the room cleared, and the place was almost closed. And the guy comes out of his office, and he looks. He's almost surprised to see her still there. And he's like, oh, okay. Yeah, why don't you come back tomorrow? She said, okay. So she came back the next day. And he saw her, and he said, hey, why don't you just wait here till the end? Same thing. He comes out, and he says, oh, you're still here? Well, why don't you wait till tomorrow? And then the next day, and the next day. And she realizes he's not going to help her. He didn't want to help her. But she kept coming back. She came back for 2 straight years. Every week, over and over and over again, and sat and waited to be rejected the same way, the same time, every week. And finally, when she was about to give up, she walked in, and it was a different person sitting at the counter. The other guy had retired. It was a woman. She comes up to the counter and says, "I'd like to apply for the scholarship." The woman says, Are you that deaf lady? Are you the deaf lady that's been waiting here for 2 years? Yes. I'm sorry. I don't even know how this happened. I don't know what's going on, but we are going to get you a scholarship today. She was just ecstatic. So they got her visa, they got her paperwork, they got it all together in one day. And then she runs home and tells her mom and her dad, and her mom and dad don't even believe her. And she's like, "Man, I don't care. I'm going to America. I don't care what you guys think." Literally within a week, she's on a plane, and she's flying to the University of Idaho. See, for her, that was her crucible. And it became unbelievably helpful and apparent to her when she showed up. Because when she showed up at college, she realized that she had never actually graduated from high school yet. And now she's in a college classroom where she doesn't understand a word the professors are saying. They don't know anything about her. She has no interpreter, and the education level is higher than she's ever seen. Now, she's telling me the story. She said, "Dan, the only way that I was able to get through is by going back and remembering what it was like to sit there for 2 years and wait and persevere." She said, if I could stay positive, if I could stay focused, I knew I could make it. And so she did. She used that memory of her crucible to push her through her graduate degree. Not just her bachelor's degree, but a graduate degree. And now she's a professor at the University of Louisville. She teaches deaf classes. And she points to that crucible moment and she says, that's the thing that helped me get through. So for you, if you're going to become an authentic leader, you've got to ask yourself, what are the difficult moments that I have been through? Ones that I wouldn't go back and repeat, but ones that have made me who I am. By remembering those, you can settle yourself, root yourself, and remember that you do deserve to be here because you have gone through some tough stuff that no one can take from you. That's the first question. What's your crucible? Second question is this. What's my craft? What's my craft? What am I good at? What's my thing? You see, when we say what's your craft, we're talking about your God-given talent, but we're also talking about the thing that you have developed and you've created it from nothing. God gave you something to work with, but you have worked it and worked it and worked it to the point where you are so excellent at it that it gives you a sense of confidence. You are good. I remember the value of recognizing your craft and working on it. When I was a freshman and I was running track for the first time. Now, I'm not really a track athlete, but at the time I was. At the time I really wanted to be. I'll tell you a story. I was a 7th grader, and I remember walking into school one day. It was in the springtime, and track season had already started, and people started asking me if I was interested in running track. They asked me, hey, have you considered running track? It was the teacher. And I said, no, I'm not going to run track. I don't want to do that. I'm a basketball player. Shoot, I don't run track. And then the principal came up to me. He said, hey, you ever think about running track? No, man, I ain't running track. And then a group of students came up to me. I remember one girl in particular. Her name was Janie. She was really good looking. They came up to me, and they were all on the track team, and they said, hey, Dan, have you thought about running track? And I said, absolutely, I've thought about running track. I mean, sign me up. I'm sorry I forgot. Where's the track team? So I signed up one day before the first meet. And I get my jersey and everything. You're 7th grade, so you can do that, right? So I get my jersey and everything, and I'm getting ready, and I put it on the night before, and I'm wearing it. I'm like, dang, I look good. Like, why didn't I do this earlier? I've got long legs. I'm an athlete, I'm black, man, I'm gonna be sweet tomorrow. And so I'm dreaming about this. The next day comes and it's just like you'd think. I mean, the stands are full of parents. It's warm outside, the sun is shining, the wind is blowing a little bit, and I'm in the 100-meter dash. First race of my life. I get down to my blocks and I'm thinking, dang, this is the beginning. And so the gun goes off and I'm running. I'm running as fast as I can. And I've never run before, so I'm running with the worst form in the world. I mean, my arms are flailing, my head is going, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm like weaving in my lane. And I'm running as fast as I can. And then I remember running with my head down. You're not supposed to, but I'm running with my head down, running as fast as I can. And then I cross the finish line. And then I look up. And then I see it. I'm dead last. You know those moments when you expect to perform at this level, and you actually perform at this level? That gap? I felt it. Fortunately, I wasn't the last guy to finish because I looked behind me and there was a chubby kid that was actually crossing the line. And so I was like, okay, I'm good. So I run the 200-meter dash and I actually turned out last in that one. And the coach comes and he puts me in a different race and I get last in that one. And then it just keeps happening, meet after meet. I'm not doing well. My form isn't getting good. In fact, what happened was the people who invited me to join the track team, the cool kids, I remember in practice I'm running and they're pointing and laughing at me because my form is so bad. And I felt that deep sense of insecurity. When the gap is too big between who you are and what you want people to think you are, you do what I did. You quit. You walk away. So what I did was I just stopped. Told the coach, I'm not doing this anymore. Walked away. Fortunately, the next year, I moved schools. My family moved to a different town. Moved to that town I was telling you about, the small town. And I had an opportunity to start over again. And so I decided to run track again. And I was just as bad as when I stopped because when you quit, that's really where you stop. And so I decided to run track again. And I was bad, but I got with the coach before practice and after practice. I did all the hard work. I stayed out late, and I worked on my craft. I worked on my blocks. I worked on my running. I worked on my form. And I kept losing races, but I got incrementally better. And then finally, I hadn't won a race all year. I got to the very end of the year, and it was the county meet. You see, the county meet was when all the schools come together, and they're all running. And I remember thinking to myself, okay, I'm going to do this. I got down on the blocks. I'd done the hard work, and I said, God, I don't even care if I win today because I know that I'm good. I've gotten better. Got down the blocks. This is the 200-meter dash. I can see everybody on my right-hand side. I'm the 8th spot. Gun goes off. I'm running. I pass number 7. Then I pass number 6. Then I pass number 5. And now I'm like, holy crap, this is going good. Now I'm running faster. I'm on my toes. I'm running as fast as I can. I pass number 4. I pass number 3. I pass number 2. And finally, at the very last second, right before the finish line, I push myself in front of the first person in line. I pass number 1 and I win the race. I'd never won a race in my life, and I just won the county meet. That's when I learned the confidence that comes from building your craft. When you know that you know that you know that you're good. You're not faking it. You are just good at what you do. The level of confidence and authenticity that comes from that, because you ain't got nothing to hide, nothing to prove to anybody. You've got nothing to lose. You are just good. So you ask yourself, what's your craft? That helps close the gap. I want to give you the next two quickly. Who's in my care? Who's in my care? This is all about servant leadership. This is recognizing that you are put on earth to help other people and make them grow. And so ultimately, your job as a leader is to help people get better, to become better than they've ever been. The first time I really realized this, when I understood who's in my care and how that question can help push back anxiety, was when I was a pastor at a small church. There's about 300 people. And I walked in, again, as a 6'4" black guy. This is in the middle of Amish country. You want to talk about insecurity? I felt it. And I walk in and I'm supposed to lead the church. And this is an older church. And so this is one of those churches that you're the leader if you've been around longer than anybody else, right? You have no leadership skills. You've been alive longer than everyone. And so everybody looks at you like you're the leader. And I remember trying to figure out who the real leader was, and it turned out it was a group of women, older women in their 70s. They were the real leaders. And in fact, not just that, it was one woman in particular named Maddie Miller. She was the ring leader. 300 people in the church. She was 79 years old. She was the leader. And so I walk up to her, and I start talking to her, and I can tell right away that she's looking at me like, who are you? You're not my leader. And the truth is, I wasn't. I was a pastor, but I wasn't her leader. I mean, at the time, I was 25 years old. And so she was old when I was born. And she looks at me and she's like, what are you going to tell me that I don't already know? And it's the truth. She was yay tall. She was old, white, Mennonite. I'm 6'4", black. We had nothing in common. But I remember telling myself, I've got to win her over. In order to lead this church, I've got to lead the leader. So, what I did, decided to go to her house and have breakfast with her. She loved to cook. Have breakfast with her every week. So I wake up early, I go to her house, I sit down and we talk. We wouldn't talk about church stuff, we would just talk about life. Get to know her as a person. Did that week after week after week after week. And after a while, she started to open up. She told me about her family. And the fact that because she was the oldest person in the area, it was lonely. Oftentimes, she didn't have people to talk to. She couldn't connect with many people. She also told me that she hadn't held a baby in years because being as old as she was and the health that she hadn't held a baby and couldn't go work in the nursery, and so she just would love to hold a baby sometime. So one morning, I woke up. My wife said, "You can go see your girlfriend again?" I said, "Yeah, maybe I will. She's cute." I grabbed my baby daughter, who was about 3 months old, and I took her with me. And I walked into her kitchen. I said, "Maddie, I know you said you never held a baby before. I'd like for you to hold my baby if you could." And Maddie started to cry. Never cried before. She cried so much that she had blurry eyes, and I was able to take this quick picture. That's Maddie. That's my baby daughter. And I realized the insecurity that you feel because sometimes there's a gap between who you are and who people think you are disappears when you start to focus on serving. When you're serving other people genuinely out of your heart because you care about them, you can't be insecure at the same time. Because you're not trying to prove anything. Not trying to hide anything. You got nothing to lose. You were just trying to help. So for me in that moment, I felt more authentic than I ever had, and she felt it too. And from that point on, we were friends. So when we walk around together, people look at us funny because she's this tall and I'm me. But it works. Serve. That's the key to authenticity. Here's the last one. What's my cause? What's my cause? Now, this is important for you because as you learn what your crucible is, as you learn what your craft is, as you keep pushing and you realize who's in your care, you become more authentic the whole time. People start to look at you differently. They realize you are who you are, who you are. You know who you are. You ain't got any daddy issues in your life because you've gone through and you figured those out. You know what your crucible is. You know what your craft is. You know who you are. You know who you serve because you've been serving them. This is the moment when you finally get to tell people what to do. This is the moment you finally get to point to something and say, we all should do this. This is when you realize your cause. This generation of leaders loves a leader with a cause. If you're passionate about a particular cause, people will follow you all day long if you're authentic about it. This is best illustrated in a quick story. It was a story about a town in Pennsylvania. And this town, small town in Pennsylvania, had a mental facility for people who had mental illnesses. And essentially, they all housed them there. But this facility grew so big and so many people were there that they realized they had to create halfway houses, a place for people to live in between the real world and the mental facility. And so what they did is they went to the city council and they said, okay, we'd like to create these halfway houses. And city council said, that's fine, we need to have a hearing, we need to have a vote on it, so come back next Thursday and we'll talk about it. So they come back next Thursday, they have a city council meeting, and the meeting, which is supposed to be just a quick one, usually 10 or 15 people, is packed. Hundreds of people showed up. Word got out in the community. People were angry, stamping their feet, smacking their hands. You are not going to put a halfway house in my neighborhood. You're not going to let those crazies next to my daughter's bedroom? Absolutely not. No way, no how. You can imagine the city council members, room full of standing angry people, 200, 300 people. Okay. So they all vote unanimously. We're not doing the halfway houses. I'm sorry, guys. You're going to have to figure something else out. As soon as they vote, the doors of the auditorium open up, the back of the auditorium, and in walks, I kid you not, Mother Teresa. She was in town to receive an award, and she heard that there was going to be a vote on people who were the most vulnerable and destitute in the community. And so she wanted to be there. True story. She strolls down the middle of the aisle. She gets down on her knees in front of the city council members, in front of everybody. Everybody is shocked to see her. She gets down on her knees and she says this. She says, please, 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 please make room for these children of God. And then she gets up and she walks out the back of the room. The room is quiet. And the city council members who had just unanimously voted to not put halfway houses in reversed their vote. The question for you and the question for me is this. Why? Why was Mother Teresa, who wasn't elected, who wasn't promoted, who had no official position or no official title, how was she able to change the minds of 200 angry people just like that? Because she was authentic. People knew who she was. They recognized the work that she had done. They realized she had pointed to something that they all had missed. Their job as leaders was to care for people. And they could figure out how to make it work. Did Mother Teresa have all the answers? No. Did she know exactly how they were going to do it? No. And there's some moments when you won't know exactly how to figure things out. You won't know all the answers, but you will be able to point to a true north, something that you believe deep in your core and say, we are made to do this. Our company was founded to do this. We are here to do this job, and I don't care how you do it, but we're going to do it. When you find your cause, when you find why you exist, why you're put on this earth, that gives you a power of authenticity that no one can take from you. You become an authentic leader by learning your crucible, realizing your craft, realizing who's in your care, and then focusing on your cause. So may you develop inside yourself your identity, May you understand where you've come from and why you're here. May you understand your gifts and your talents. May you understand your cause. And may you, at the end of the day, become a more authentic, powerful leader. Thanks for your time.
Thank you. I'm going to give you a few minutes to ask Dan Owolabi any questions you might have or make any suggestions. We could do a little quick group therapy. We've got 10 minutes, so he's yours for 10 minutes. And Cindy has the microphone. So I have a question for you, Dan. How do you see the best way possibly for a university of teaching and learning to engage our students in asking these 4 questions? I think we do this to some degree every day, but have you seen a successful program of teaching this to young people?
Yeah, that's a great question. In the university settings I've been in, the best professors, the best teachers, the best programs are the ones that really care about their students, right? It's about connecting with them. Because what you realize, and the student that spoke a little bit earlier said this well, every student when they walk into college or a university setting, they are an old high schooler. And so they have those thinkings, they have those mentalities, they have those thoughts. But by the time they're a senior, they've changed. And in that process, there's a lot of pain and a lot of breaking down of pretenses. And so as a university, if you're able to walk with a student long enough to be present for those moments when they really have a crisis of confidence, you can point to these questions and say, no. You've been through tough stuff before. You can get through this. No. What are you good at? What have you worked at? Hey, get outside yourself. Serve other people. Because then you'll push back the insecurity. Or what's your cause? See, if you're able to do that, then you can help them reorient themselves and they're not acting like someone that they're not.
Right. Thank you. There's a question back there in the back.
Leaning off of what President Fell said, what about junior high and high school, kids that maybe haven't went through their crucible yet? What advice would you give us, since we have a lot of teachers in here as well, at that level, maybe to start to push this so that they're there?
Yeah, that's a really good question. You're talking about junior high and high school students. Yeah, that's good. Who haven't gone through some of the crucibles that we've gone through. I'll tell just a quick story with that, short story. My wife recently taught my daughter how to ride a bike. And it's amazing when you talk to her. She's 6 years old. When you talk to her, and she's afraid to get back on the bike again because she's fallen a bunch of times. And what my wife did was just got down on a knee, got eye to eye, and said, hey, you remember when you learned to swing? Do you remember how hard that was? How frustrated you got? This is just like that. Because you got through that, you can get through this. See, everybody has a crucible, and it's always relative in your own mind, you know? And so being able to know them well enough to find that and pull that out of them, that's the key. They might not have been through a divorce, but they absolutely have fallen down. So, it's a good question.
Thank you. Another question? Thank you, Dan. This has been fantastic. I think we're all thinking about our gap, and so we just can't talk. You've rendered us speechless, which in and of itself is a little miracle. So thank you again, everybody, for joining us for our Fridays at Findlay, and particularly for this one this morning. I think it's a great way to end our academic year of Fridays at Findlay. Thanks again to First Federal for supporting us next year in this effort. Watch the website. In midsummer, you'll see the new dates and the new speakers. I'm sure they'll be inspiring and engaging. So please save your Friday mornings until you hear from us. You wouldn't want to be anywhere else. Thank you. Thanks again, and have a great day. Thank you, Dan.